2022. I think today's probably the last day it's okay to say Happy New Year still, so it's a Happy New Year to everybody. You may have seen last week that we put our survey results out in the press, and we got some really good press traction as usual, talking about the state of the market. We thought it was really important at this stage in the recruitment cycle to give everybody an update of where we think the market is at. So that's what we're going to be covering this morning. I'll introduce Nicola shortly. She's probably got about 20-25 minutes or so of slides. As with all our webinars, please do engage on the platform. If you've got any questions, pop them into the question box. I'll be keeping an eye on those as we go through, and we'll pop those through to Nicola at the end. Again, as with all our webinars, it is recording, so we will put this online onto our website over the next couple of days, so you will be able to go back and revisit anything you've missed, or share it with any of your colleagues who you think also need to get access to this information. So that's everything to get us going. What I'll do is hand straight over to Nicola, and let's get straight into the content. Nicola is joining us. If you've joined one of our webinars with Nicola before, you know she's at the moment, for the next couple of weeks at least, still based in New Zealand. So this is Friday night, midnight. What are things we're doing on Friday night, midnight, Nicola? So lots of big gratitude actually in doing it at a convenient time for us in the UK. Anyway, that's enough from me. Nicola, over to you.
Of course. Would you believe me if I said there's nothing I'd rather be doing? So I'll just start with that one. I'll just start sharing my screen and do the obligatory. Stephen, can you see my slides before I progress?
Yes, I can do.
Perfect, awesome. Cool. So as Stephen said, I'm going to be chatting about a report that we released last week. It's really looking at graduate and school and college leaver vacancies and how they've changed across the last couple of years since the pandemic, and specifically how they've changed from last year to this year. Cool, perfect. So I'll briefly talk about the report in general, and then go to discuss more specifically on graduate vacancies, then school leaver and college vacancies, quantity and quality of applications, and then please put in any questions. Stephen's having a look at the questions, so type them or jump in at the end. So just to give you a bit of an overview, basically, we collected data from September last year until January this year. And we collected data from 177 employers. Some were at multiple points in time, so both in September and in January. These employers collectively hire more than 32,000 graduates, so quite a big proportion of the graduates hired, and gives us quite a good estimate as to what's happening in the labour market, and over 17,000 school leavers each year. So we compared actual and predicted vacancies and hires from 2022 to 2021, 2020, and 2019. So I'll just jump into what's happening around graduate vacancies. So as you can see here, now hopefully it's not too much of a confusing graph and it's big enough, but graduate vacancies are set to increase by more than 20%, and this is compared to 2019. So you can see that there's quite a big range of how the growth and shrinkage in the graduate recruitment market has changed over the years. But we're specifically interested in understanding, has the vacancy levels and graduate vacancies bounced back since 2019, and how have they fluctuated specifically compared to last year? So it's good news in many ways that graduate vacancies have surpassed the pre-pandemic levels. And they've also surpassed 2021 vacancies. So when we did the recruitment survey in September, we were really surprised and excited to see sort of the growth that was charted for this year. And now it's great to see that that growth in predicted vacancies has been followed up by actual vacancies and predicted hires. So compared to 2021, vacancies for graduates are set to increase by 22%. And this difference varies between sectors, as I'll show you in the next slide. So the sector differences highlight growth patterns since the pandemic began. The only industry to experience a reduction in vacancies since last year, that's a reduction of 11% since last year, is the charity and public sector. Yet this sector grew overall compared to pre-pandemic levels. So even though it's a reduction on last year, charting right back to pre-pandemic times, it has grown overall. So that's also good news. The only sector that has not yet reached pre-pandemic levels is probably not surprising, retail and FMCG. I guess we can all get a sense of why that may be, but as I'll come onto in a moment, the school and college leaver sector differences are quite striking. So we can see some of the recruitment has shifted to look at different entries into early employment. So the sector differences in graduate vacancies from compared 2022 to pre-pandemic 2019 and from this year to last year. So you can see first looking at 2022 to 2019, there's some really significant changes in vacancies in the built environment sector and in digital and IT, and again, unsurprisingly, since the pandemic began, in health and pharmaceuticals. Then some steady growth in the rest, finance and professional services, energy, charity and public sector, and legal. And as I said before, the only sector to not have returned to pre-pandemic levels is retail and FMCG. So the change from 2021 and 2022, we can see that the biggest growth building on last year is still in built environment, and also significant growth, 37% in health and pharmaceuticals. Again, that's not surprising given the focus of the world at the moment, and also in energy, engineering and industry. And as I mentioned, a reduction of 11% in vacancies and predicted hires from last year in charity and public sector. So now comparing that to school leaver vacancies. So school and college leaver vacancies surpass all previous levels. It's interesting because there's never been a significant dip in these vacancies, so even from when the pandemic started. And this shows the confidence and also the spend, of course, the different government policies and encouragement to use different spending from companies to increase entry at employment at this level. So compared to 2021, vacancies for school and college leavers are set to increase by 17% and by 40% compared to 2019. So this difference varies between sectors. So no sectors experience a reduction in vacancies since 2019 or from last year. And sector differences really contrast against graduate hiring patterns. And this indicates an effort to diversify channels into early career employment. So not just through the standard graduate vacancy pathways as being the default. So changes to school and college leaver vacancies in 2022 compared to last year, we can see again that there's some changes, as you'll notice here, but built environment is again up 30%, finance and professional services 37% compared to last year. And interestingly, compared to graduates, there's actually been a 55% increase in retail and FMCG vacancies at the school and college leaver level. So as you'll get a feel for now, there's actually core sector differences and commonalities across graduate and student recruitment. So just to highlight a couple, the school and college leavers have experienced high growth in retail and FMCG compared to a reduction in graduates. So there's never been a significant dip at the school and college leaver levels, whereas graduates hasn't actually returned to the pre-pandemic. So that's quite a striking difference, which we'll discuss in a little more detail in the next couple of slides. So both student and college leavers and graduates have experienced growth in the built environment sector. So that's 30% and 48% respectively. So that's some pretty steady increase looking at building year on year from last year. And compared to last year, graduate vacancies in health and pharmaceuticals have increased significantly, 37%, but not as significantly for school and college leavers, 8%, but it's still obviously an increase. So there are multiple contributing factors for the increase in school and college leaver vacancies, and it's good news, obviously, because it offers a new entryway into employment, and it helps to diversify the labour market at this level. So due to that apprenticeship level, obviously there's been significant changes in how employers are recruiting at this level, and employers are taking creative approaches to hiring school and college leavers. And as we can see with the continued growth in the graduate labour market, it isn't actually just one pie, you know, and increase in school and college leavers is taking away graduate vacancies. It's actually continued growth in both, which is exciting when we start to think about increasing diversity in the labour market at this level, as well as providing more opportunities for entry into your first job. So due to a need for more specific skills, there's an emphasis in continuing to be placed on vocational skills in addition to a university education. So obviously university education is really supportive and helpful for growing critical thinking skills and other skills that are developed just through being at university. But there's actually an opportunity to focus more on vocational skills at the school and college levels. And this is prompting continued growth really in vacancies for school and college leavers. And for example, one accountancy and consulting firm reported school and college leavers made only 10–15% of the trainee intake in 2011. But now, 11 years later, that's actually increased to 40%. So there's been an overall growth across both graduate and school and college leavers, and it's really sustained core growth for people at this level, which is really exciting. So now looking at the quantity and quality of applicants. So if you read the recruitment report that we launched in September, there's been some interesting fluctuations of the competition levels for students trying to get their first job or trying to enter the labour market after a placement year last year, and tracking how that's changed this year is pretty interesting. So employers have noted that there's actually a drop in quantity of graduate applicants in 2022. So this is compared to 2021. We can see that 48% of employers who completed the survey in January noted that there had been 48% of them noted there had been less applications than normal. 44% said about the same number of applications as normal, and 6% noted that there are more applications. So this really shows that there are a lot of contributing factors as we settle more into this sort of virtual way of working and virtual way of engaging as to why there are potentially less applications than normal. And it also shows that there's perhaps a shift in the market to being more student driven, which is interesting considering the statistics that we found last year in September around the competition for students. So the quality of graduate applicants compared to this time last year, 18% of employers noted that there's actually been reduced lower quality of applicants, 69% about the same quality as normal, and 13% said there's been higher quality. So quite varied response there actually, but it really shows that it's not just a matter of quantity, obviously, for students who are applying for roles, but also quality to making sure they're not just inflating their chances by sort of putting in a lot of applications, but creating high quality and bespoke ones for each scheme. So comparing the quantity and quality levers from quantity and quality of applications from graduate to school and college leavers, we can see that actually 63% of employers said there's been less applications than normal, which is pretty significant compared to this time last year. About the same, 27% indicated there's about the same number of applications and 10% more applications than usual. So we can see that there's actually a pretty significant difference here between school and college leavers and the quantity and graduates. The quality of school leaver applicants in 2020 compared to this time last year, there's been a huge proportion of the people who responded to the survey in January indicated that 90% actually said there's been lower quality of applicants than normal. 7% said about the same quality as normal and 3% higher quality. So a huge shift here in the perception of actually the quality of applicants for the school college leavers this time around compared to this time last year. So this really has some, important dynamics for actually the shifting labour market. So reduction in applicant quantity signals, as I said, a shift really to the student-driven labour market, and this comes after the peak competition that we reported on last year. And it really highlights that actually for students, it's important to be tracking the sort of roles that you're wanting to apply for and be really focused on those roles and entering the labour market in quite a strategic way. But also it's encouraging, obviously, that there's less competition and less pent up applicants who are going to be applying for each role. So employers have indicated to us that they're struggling to engage with students in an increasingly virtual environment. And anecdotally, some employers have been saying that with an increasingly virtual recruitment environment, with careers fairs, what they're actually finding is that employers who aren't name brand are unable to attract enough applicants as people aren't sort of dropping into their virtual spaces as they have been previously. University careers teams have indicated to us that there's actually a bit of an oversaturation of employers who are trying to engage with students. And as they now return to even some students a hybrid environment, it can be overwhelming trying to navigate how many actual virtual career fairs there are and virtual employer-led opportunities there are to connect with employers. So it's important to try figure out what the new normal is, I guess, as we move forward in this space, and how to encourage students to, of course, keep applying to make sure that they're able to find the roles that they want. And it's important for students, obviously, to emphasize that they still have the quality. The quality is there when they're applying for roles. So yeah, that's a bit of an overview of what we've found in 2022 and tracking from last September. And I hope it's been sort of interesting and insightful. And if you have any questions or comments, then yeah, please chip in and let's have a conversation and hear what you have to say. If this data reflects your experience as employers or as a university careers team, and what you're feeling about vacancy levels at the moment.
That's great. Thanks, Nicola. Really good, a good overview. And it's good to get this sort of pulse midway through the recruitment season, in between because our survey we produced in September, isn't it? It always tends to be backward looking. It says the season's finished. So this is very much as it's happening at the moment. I've got no questions yet. So just a reminder, use the platform, pop any questions for either Nicola or I that you've got into there. We've got plenty of time to cover those. So overall, it's good news, isn't it, with the market that actually that vacancies are up. Do we know whether actually we think it's employers, I guess, catching up on recruitment that they didn't do last year because they couldn't, or it's a sign of the economy bouncing back? I heard on the radio first thing this morning that I think November the economy, this is before Omicron kicked off, was actually back to pre-pandemic levels of activity, but I guess it's not there now. So I don't know. Have we got any inkling of what's driving this from employers, or is it probably just a whole range of different reasons?
Yeah, I think it's an important question. I actually think it's both. I used to work internal in a recruitment team, for those that know my background, and I've been speaking to some of my friends who still work internally, and they've said that, of course, there's budgetary restrictions that have been in place, and as the confidence in the market has started to grow, their budget has been expanded, and some of the roles that have been on hold they've now started to recruit for. So I think that's on the one hand, and then on the other is a lot of companies are actually experiencing growth in their business, and they simply need more employees, which is also a sign of good confidence and also economic growth. As you said, it started to pick up from November last year. So I think it's sort of two-pronged.
Got it. And I guess the bit we don't know is whether Brexit's having an impact. It probably is in some way on labour supply. I know in the non-graduate space it gets talked about a lot, whether it's lorry drivers or other sectors, healthcare, for example. But I'm guessing that tightness in the labour market is also forcing employers to think more about early talent.
Exactly. Yeah, I was reading anecdotally about hospitality and how the drop in hospitality workers that are coming from the EU has actually forced hotel owners, for example, to look for alternative sources and pipeline of candidates, and they're finding that that can come from those who are entering the labour market for the first time. So I think that's interesting. But then on the flip side of that, obviously, some hospitality owners are actually having to reduce the amount of, for example, hotel and motel rooms that they can offer due to shortage in their staffing levels. So I think it's important that obviously people in the hospitality, as we've just seen, there's been differences across sectors, that they can get the staff that they need, and if that can be supported by people who are entering the labour market, then that's, you know, obviously great on both accounts.
Yeah. I've got some questions coming through thick and fast, so I should probably concentrate on those, or we'll run out of time. I've always got loads of questions for you, Nicola. Right, so let's have a look. So a question from Libby. So yes, this has been a lot of sort of topical conversations on our forum. So are employers looking at more creative ways to engage students in virtual events? As a careers professional, she would agree that there is a saturation of virtual online events for students. Any thoughts on that, Nicola?
I have actually heard anecdotally, and I don't know how common this is, but I've heard from one internal recruitment team that they're looking at doing sort of almost hybrid with VR headsets. So people who are physically present at university, but the careers team may not be there, they can get the VR headsets from the careers team and you know, go and have a look around the office. And of course, that also happened in pre-pandemic times. But I think employers who are trying to figure out how to engage with talent in a sort of hybrid environment is very important. As we've heard, obviously, from a lot of employers, they can actually engage with more universities across the country, which is advantageous in some ways, but as we've also heard, students are feeling overwhelmed. So I think, as we say to, you know, candidates, make sure you have the quality of application, and I feel like also to employers, it's important to do something that stands out, especially if you don't necessarily have the brand name and familiarity, to ensure that candidates are drawn and attracted. And of course, there's employers who are engaging, you know, in curriculum at universities, and we've heard of that is also successful, but it's making sure that it's, of course, the right curriculum and in the right areas. So I think there's mixed approaches.
It's going to be interesting to see how much stuff goes back face to face, I think, over the coming year. I was on a call earlier this week, and it was interesting, that was one of the topics of conversation. People saying that actually there seems to be more thinking going around that for the coming year. So we'll definitely keep a track on that. A question from Helen. I don't think we do this separate, actually, but transport and logistics sector, and we've got some members in that space, but do we? I think we absorb them into the engineering and industry kind of numbers, don't we, Nicola?
Yeah, we do at the moment. We did change how we sort of lumped the sectors together a couple of years ago, and I was reviewing that and making sure, obviously, we want enough sectors that really accurately reflect the market as accurately as we can. But if we have too many, but we don't have enough members in those areas, then it can sort of skew the statistics a little bit. So we unfortunately don't record that separately at the moment.
Again, anecdotally, I do know of a couple of airlines, people in the travel business, which you could argue is partly logistics as well and transport, actually, that they're coming back into the market. So I think there are positive signs in that sector that has been particularly hard hit over the last couple of
yeah, definitely. And actually, in saying that, I think as we sort of progress forward, and COVID, fingers crossed, not to jinx it, fades into the background a little bit, I think it will be interesting to pick up on some of these sector differences as we move into a more climate conscious environment. Especially, I've heard from students who are looking for roles, and I've read it and wrote about it recently last week, about students who are looking for climate conscious or carbon conscious employers. So it will be really important to see how transport as a sector is impacted, as well as, of course, different sectors that are more heavily implicated in carbon emissions. So I think it's very important to get the sort of sector split right.
Cool. If everybody thinks I'm looking funny, it's because I've got varifocals on, so I'm having to look across my screen. So although I'm looking like I'm kind of sort of sticking my head up and looking out the window, it's because I'm trying to get my varifocals in the right space because the text is quite small for these questions. A question from Ian. So Ian's asking about the extent to which our vacancies are differentiated by what universities would consider good outcomes. So I guess that's the level of graduate jobs. And I guess that's not something we differentiate, but all our data is for actual graduate training programs or school leaver training programs or apprentice programs, aren't they, Nicola? So I think from a university point of view, they would be the good careers kind of outcomes on the destinations data.
Yeah, exactly. So I think some employers who maybe recruit, say, 10 graduates, they may not have a specific like graduate program, but more ad hoc graduates that they're recruiting at the sort of graduate level. So I think be it the roles that are specifically in a graduate scheme or just graduate level roles, for that at the university level, they would all be considered sort of there. But I think it's also interesting to consider and to dig more into sort of university level data. But from this data which we've presented today, it's specifically reported from employers.
And it's worth saying on our base of members, our employer members, if you're not running a program of some sort, actually you wouldn't be an ISE member. We don't really cater to the ad hoc type of recruitment market. So all our employers will have somebody who has, you know, student recruitment development in their job title, which by the nature of our data, I mean, it kind of makes it that kind of outcome end. I think it's a good proxy for the rest of the market when we've looked at actually our data over the years compared to other indicators by sectors, that actually for sectors doing well in the early talent space with our data, they're probably recruiting more generally across the board as well. I don't know if you'll know anything about this from our data, Nicola, and it's not something I've picked up much yet on conversations, but actually a question from Elmer talking about school leaver applications being down. To what extent might there be delayed applications versus school leavers versus going to university, and this whole dynamic of university or school leaver vacancies? I guess that's something that I don't know. Do you have any insights on that? Or is that something we have to wait a little bit to the year end to find out?
Yeah, it's definitely an important question. And I was reading last week, actually in the article you were quoted in, Stephen, that there's definitely a sort of push to make sure that people who are at that school and college leaver level are totally aware of the options that they have, and not just sort of going into university as the default, but totally aware that there are other opportunities, for example, apprenticeships and things like that. So I think it is interesting. It will be interesting to see how it unfolds, especially in the next few years. Are people looking for more, for example, if you're going to get paid while you're doing a qualification, then that's a big tick in the apprenticeship level compared to going to university and having that loan. So it'll be interesting to see how people respond to this sort of crisis compared to how they did the global financial crisis, as people become more aware of student loans and stuff, that student loan burden at a younger age. So we don't have that data specifically yet, but we will as the year tracks on, and we get into more detail around how the school and college leaver vacancies panned out over the whole of 2022.
I don't know, from my experience dealing with a couple of schools, that actually schools have really struggled, of course, during the pandemic to deliver you know, their normal careers agenda, because employers haven't been able to go on site as with universities. The school careers piece is much more diverse than in the HE space. So I think there probably has been an element also of it's been a bit harder. The schools I've worked with, it's been harder to get some of those messages out to students as well. And of course, in the HE space, there's been so much attention in the press about what's happening on campus and universities as well. So that might have had a positive or even a negative impact. I think it is difficult to say. The one thing I will say on the school leaver piece is actually just still listening to the you know, sort of the non-pandemic policy debates and what's that undertow happening around you know, vocational versus what's perceived as non-vocational type education route school. That debate is still there, and I think we're still waiting for quite a lot to come out of government on things like the Augur review, you know, the financial settlement between HE and FE and other routes. So I definitely don't think that's going away.
Yeah, definitely. And also we've had a number of employers recently ask in queries about how other employers are actually branding their apprenticeship schemes. So are they actually calling the sort of higher level apprenticeship schemes, but is there sort of a stigma to those people who are going in at a higher level? So I think there's still a lot of growth as employers actually figure out what is the best way to attract people at different stages in their career, and even internal moves who are wanting to enter at a higher level than others. So yeah, I think there's some interesting things to unpack there in this coming year.
Definitely. And a question from Charlotte talking about the perceived drop in quality of school and college leaver applications. A question asking around why is it, and Charlotte suggesting this could be, missed opportunities, education in the past 2 years, meaning that applicants are just struggling to demonstrate the skills they've got. I guess they've not done as much work, there's not had as much stuff in the curriculum maybe. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it was a somewhat surprising result actually, and it's something that we've flagged for a future poll because of the striking results there. One of the things that I've heard is as this was for universities, but I think it could also be applied here. It depends in what sense the quality of the applications had dropped. If they were just the sort of first gateway into the application process, or if they were at the interview stage, it could be different reasons. So for example, if the quality dropped at the interview stage, it would make sense, knowing what we know about the impact of virtual environments, especially at that impressionable age, that there may be some reduction in just comfort in an interview setting, as people perhaps who have been in-person learnings have sort of stretched their comfort zone more and more. So that could be a contributing factor. But also maybe just in an online environment at school, they have learned less about how to apply for these sort of roles. I'm not 100% sure yet, but it's definitely something that we'll find out in the coming months. So keep your eyes posted for those polls and fill them in.
Definitely. And a comment and question from Norleen here around, and it's this bit around Norleen states that students don't want to attend employer information events anymore, particularly if the information is repeating stuff that they can get online anyway. And I guess there is a whole sort of conversation going on, we know, amongst employers and universities around actually what's the best way to engage with students. I mean, the graduate space is always a very noisy space, pandemic or not. And I guess, is there anything you're picking up around? So Nolene specifically asks, is do we think employers are on board for actually there's changes in student dynamics, or might employers be behind the curve and need to rethink what they're doing?
I think it's something that they're acutely aware of, and as you know, Stephen, because we've hosted a lot of events in the past couple months, trying to facilitate the most advantageous relationship between employers and universities to make sure that graduates are getting the opportunities that they need. And I think it's a learning piece now as the sort of world of work and this employer space transitions to a more virtual environment. It's a learning piece to understand what that specifically looks like at this space. And I think there will be some teething pains as we're seeing specifically now, but from the employers I've been communicating with, it seems like they are very much keen to progress and take some strides in actually engaging students in the way that the students want to be engaged, and actually reflecting on what is a student voice in this space, what can we do to actually ensure that they so for example, not just saying, hey, here's an employer event, come and listen to what we can offer you, but actually here's an employer event that maybe is to do with mental health, how to how to increase your mental health and exam time, and it's something that an employer will sponsor, and then they'll build relationships in a more organic way. Obviously that's more resource intensive, but that's an avenue that employers are looking at the moment, how to increase that engagement in that way.
Thank you. And another question from Nolene, actually, I'll probably answer this one. Nolene saying that, do we think the drop in perception of the dropped applications is due to Brexit and employers engaging with the graduate route for international students? I was doing some work on this in the run up to Christmas, working with ISE and others, and also around the visa routes for employers. And the feedback we've had from employers say more is they're not actually experiencing a drop in international students applying. The employer challenges with the visa routes are actually how the visa routes, how it's applied, the complexity of the visa routes, about what happens with students staying beyond the graduate route, because most employers want hiring for the long term, not just for 2 years. So when we ask employers specifically, I mean, we'll do this again in the main annual survey, won't we, Nicola, where we'll ask actually how many international students did you hire? It's a season end question rather than an in-process question. But yeah, that's the feedback I get, is then there's not a shortage of international student applications. The challenges employers have is around the visa system still.
Yeah, interesting.
Cool. I think that's it for the questions, Nicola. Thank you very much. That was a really good comprehensive overview of where we're at the moment. So yeah, good news for the market in general. It's good to see. I mean, that's always a good thing when vacancies are up. And the feedback we get from employers is that they're running pretty hot at the moment. You know, teams are still constrained. People aren't back in their offices, so it's quite a challenging time.
I would just jump in and say one thing to everyone on the call. Obviously, thanks for joining. We are just at the moment, we've launched the survey for the development survey, so it's open for your responses. We're really keen to get them. It's very important at the moment, and more now so than ever, to understand how development of graduates and school and college leavers is changing in a virtual world, and how the skills and the skills necessary have changed. So please fill that out. I will have sent you an email. If you haven't got the email for whatever reason, then just drop me an email and I'll send you the survey link.
Great, definitely fantastic plug, Nicola. And one of the things that survey covers actually is retention rates. So that's of course looking at people once they're in the organisation, and there's lots of conversation around about the Great Resignation, and we don't know yet if that is applying to graduate programs. So it'll be really interesting to find out that data.
Yeah.
A quick question has popped in from Ian, just as we close. The diversity stuff again, we'll know at the end of the season. There is concern around the digital divide. Are some groups, finding the current environment more challenging than others? I think there is a lot of truth in that. So, but again, that's something we'll come back to later in the year.
Perfect.
Fab. Nicola, thank you very much. Are you going out partying now, or just going to go and get some sleep?
No, I'm staying with my grandparents this weekend, so I don't think I'll go out partying tonight.
Well, actually, thank you very much for staying up so late in New Zealand, and we'll talk to you again soon. And thanks for everybody for logging into the webinar. As I said at the start, we've recorded it, so if you want to go back and catch anything that you missed, or you want to share it amongst peers and colleagues, please do. Also, this report is on the website, so if you go onto the website, into the report section, you'll see all the data that Nicola presented earlier. So that's enough from us. Thanks everybody for joining, and have a good weekend, everybody. Talk to you all very, very soon. Bye-bye for now.
See you later.